Hey guys, what's up? Stock Retail coming back to you. Excited to bring a few thoughts today on some things going on in the world of crypto, some things going on with AMC. Um, Feeling kind of hopeful, to be honest, that I can maybe make a few more videos for a while here. This next stretch maybe gets a little less hectic in my life. Just had quite the season for me for, boy, many months now. But kind of coming up for air and excited to sort of share some thoughts with you. I get pinged a little bit here in comments and quite a bit on Twitter asking me to maybe share some more thoughts on videos. So just glad that I could do that today. And like I said, I'm going to walk through a lot of things I'm seeing going on, in particular with Bitcoin, and kind of reminding and revisiting the thesis that I've been sharing a bit, especially if you follow me on Twitter, you've seen that. In some cases, I've been clear. In some cases, I've been a little cryptic about crypto. And people have been kind of asking me to clarify that. So I'll continue to kind of, I don't know, pull back the curtain a little bit on some thoughts I have and why I'm talking about Bitcoin a little bit. But just as always, relate that back to AMC. This has, kind of been my focus for, gosh, 3+ years now. I'm not quitting until the end. And so that's what this channel mostly is about. And we'll kind of hit that today along with a few other little nuggets. So, first off, just kind of hitting a few highlights, things that I've shared in the past, but just reminding. In some cases I may have new listeners, and in some cases you might have forgotten some of these things. So as you position the overall picture of Bitcoin, what it's doing, where it's going, what it's going to start to mean in the world of what I'll kind of call finance or global finance. First off, just a silly example, not a silly, actually, a one-off example, I should have called it. You can see El Salvador here in the middle on the right was actually offering, this is a little while back in December, basically offering citizenship for people who would effectively pay for like donations in Bitcoin. So you can just hear like, boy, there's a whole country thirsty for Bitcoin. Okay, so what's going on there? You might have seen the recent development when a flag was flown over the White House or over the Capitol for Satoshi. There's just been all these interesting little signals out there, and if you watch, you might believe that in kind of the saying that there's no coincidences. I actually kind of happen to. I know that maybe sounds a little bit conspiracy theorist, but when you see signals out there, when you see pivots of positions, there's often bigger things going on behind the scenes. Just think of it like the current in an ocean kind of shifting. So if you've got countries signaling that they would basically let you buy citizenship for Bitcoin, that's kind of a signal of a high demand for that. Just kind of fun and interesting if you're kind of into science and energy and some other topics. You can see both in El Salvador and then at the bottom in Iceland. Mining for Bitcoin is somewhat energy intensive. It's an expensive proposition, but a valuable proposition. There's a high return on that. And so you can see some people are even using like geothermal energy to mine for Bitcoin. So that's another signal to you that people have been real interested in figuring some things out and investing in that space. And like I said, I promise I'm going to kind of tie this back to where we're going with AMC. If you didn't know, so kind of in the price action, you got to kind of think through, like, so you've seen Bitcoin be a little bit choppy. The ETFs came out, there was a little bit of a bump, then there was a dip, then there's been a kind of a re-rip. And as I film this, we're somewhere around, I don't know, well, here, I'll just check. I think we were kind of close to like 51.5 or, let's see, yeah, about 51.5 as I film this. But you need to know that there's been some liquidations. And at one point, I tweeted that I think a lot of Bitcoin folks are going to, would do well to learn about the history of Wanda and AMC. And why did I share that? Because if you go back to 2021, Wanda was liquidating AMC to move cash back to China. There's a whole DD I've done about that basically the Chinese government told some of their Chinese national firms to bring cash back to China. You can now, in hindsight, imagine why that was going on, right? China saw a lot of problems coming, particularly in real estate in China, and knew they were going to need some cash back home. So that was the whole story on Wanda. But what happened was it was impacting AMC's price action because every time we seemed to gain ground, Wanda was selling. And then when they were done, it wasn't long after we started ripping. So that's why I just want you to know that, of course, you've heard about FTX with Sam, and there's been a lot of liquidations going on there. Not just Bitcoin, that's been in some other coins too, Ethereum and some other assets. But in particular, Bitcoin, there's been a lot of liquidations there. And then there's another company called Genesis that just recently, you can see this tweet at the bottom was from February 14th. Genesis had gotten court approval to sell almost $2 billion of Bitcoin and Ethereum trust shares. So there's been kind of a lot going on in that space, which is more sell pressure, right? But the positive there is when that's done, in some ways that's a one-time event. It's not like an ongoing business model. And so when that's done, perhaps you could expect a little less selling pressure on it. And so that, to me, says, oh, that might be something I'm interested in accumulating on those dips. The other thing to keep in mind, so if you look since the ETFs were created, if you kind of take out Grayscale, perhaps you've heard of them. That's the GBTC fund that was in existence before all of this happened. If you go back just like, I don't know, the last 5-6 weeks since the ETFs have come on board, you can see there's over $12 billion of inflows into everybody but Grayscale. But now Grayscale, on the other hand, has been migrating effectively. So they were also selling. So you had this sell pressure of this $7 billion out of Grayscale. So the total inflow is still big. In that time, there's been $5 billion of inflow into these ETFs, which is a pretty big deal. But now imagine once Grayscale is done, if you were to take that 7 billion out. So if you think once FTX is done, once Genesis is done, once Grayscale is done, that to me says something may shift in coming days and months. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not, first of all, I've said clearly, I'm more of kind of an AMC account here, and I will be until we win. So I'm not here to pump Bitcoin or anything. It's got its own ecosystem. It's far bigger than me. And so I'm not just saying, hey, to the moon on this thing, because also, for instance, the inflows are in some ways a little bit of a pop. Like there was this massive inflow. I don't expect it to keep the same pace it has, although I do believe there is significant increased demand compared to history on Bitcoin as it continues to expand out to people who perhaps didn't used to place their money in crypto. You just think of like perhaps an older retiree who's now got a piece of their retirement in an ETF in Bitcoin, things like that. So it's expanded to a broader market. So there's more demand, and at some point some of this selling will stop. So that to me is just really interesting as a watch item. Then the other thing you want to think about, so I'm just kind of playing with words here, but more than half-baked. So you may have heard about halving with Bitcoin. And so if you kind of look at the top right, and you can just go search, just Google Bitcoin halving. If you think about, let's talk about a real asset like gold. What if in a couple months, all of a sudden, for the same amount of effort in mining gold, you only got half of the gold back that you used to? So that's halving. And so you can imagine if that was the case, if the supply of new gold effectively became twice as hard to get, or you would only get half as much as you used to get for the same effort, what happens when you pinch supply? Just think about the laws of supply and demand. So I just talked to you a little bit about how demand has been going up, sell pressure on some of the liquidations may be stopping soon. And now I'm talking to you about how sort of there'll be a pinch point on supply. And effectively, Satoshi and whatever theory you want to buy on who he, she, they were. By the way, I'm not talking about pronouns. I'm talking about some people have theories that it's more than one person. So whatever theories you have about Satoshi, the point is, I'll call him he, built a kind of a fail-safe against inflation. So you can kind of see if you research it that in order to make sure there wasn't an oversupply, I think it's like every 210,000 blocks as people are mining for the coin and sort of solving these problems and creating the blocks. Every 210,000 blocks, it gets cut in half. So you can kind of see here, the first blocks ever mined saw rewards of 50 coins. Man, can you imagine? But this has now dropped following 3 halvings to 6.25 coins. The last time was in May of 2020. So now that 6.25 is about to get cut in half again. So you can just imagine as you're cutting new supply and increasing demand, that starts to act like a precious commodity. And so that's why if you're on Twitter, you maybe have seen me start to talk a little bit about this in terms of, actually, I think you saw, I don't remember now if it was BlackRock or a few others, I think CNBC at one point talked about Bitcoin as perhaps being an asset that's going to become more precious than gold. Really interesting way of looking at it. And there are, I've mentioned before, some countries even talking about, would they ever back currency with something like Bitcoin, which, by the way, I kind of think the people would benefit, because if you think about our fiat currency now that's not really backed with anything other than the trust of the treasury, um, and perhaps our military, we're printing money on demand. We're funding our entire society with debt. We've got inflation run rampant. It's becoming perhaps unsustainable. So what happens if you've got something that actually has a real store of value, and you start backing, you know, um, the economy with that? I'm sort of tangenting onto a whole other thing, but I'm also kind of hinting at what perhaps we're going to see some shifts over even the next, not just years, but even decades, in how a lot of things work. I just have a feeling. We'll see. But the point is, there are still a lot of catalysts, I believe, for Bitcoin. And again, this is not, it may sound like a Bitcoin video, but it's not. So let's just review. Um, Liquidations end at some point. There's record inflows. Halving is coming. Nations are positioning and posturing. You can even see that. It's not just some of the, El Salvador and Iceland. It's even the U.S. and other nations. And reminder, by the way, I had referenced once, what if Bitcoin was effectively a currency with a conscience? If you think about blockchain and you think about I'll use that word fail-safe, some of the fail-safes again that have been built in um, to it, as I'll call it, as a kind of a process in a system. In a way, it's real problematic if you create sort of false statements of work, and you will get caught. The blockchains have a memory. And so, recall that effectively Sam and CZ were committing fraud and adjacent to, and in some cases directly using Bitcoin. You can get into swaps and wrapped assets and a whole lot of things. And that is where, by the way, actually, because, hey, what about AMC? So we'd have to start talking about the tokens and a lot that's gone on for AMC. And so that is why if you followed me on Twitter, you've seen me in, I don't know, just like the last 6 months, start to talk about this a lot more as it was coming. And I've shown some timelines even. In fact, let's talk about this a little bit. So I'll just leave this at a little bit of a tease. So I'm calling this a re-tease, but I will kind of continue to talk about it and try to, over time, make it more and more clear. So it goes like this. So I'm just going to kind of walk you through this tweet that I had done. I think this was in January, but I had started to talk about this maybe as far back as like last October-ish, or maybe even September-ish. So you had these tokens that were basically wrapped with crypto, and they were effectively like phantom assets, almost like ghosts, like they didn't really exist. So now I'm talking about both Binance and FTX. You can go find other videos of mine. You can find whole write-ups on Reddit that talk about, like, the tokens were made January 27th. I don't think I have to, of 2021. I don't think I have to help anyone really understand why that is one heck of a smoking gun. That, basically within 24 hours, Citadel and Vlad over at Robinhood, and don't sleep on Interactive Brokers, they're all removing the buy button. At the same time, Sam and CZ, and don't sleep on Bittrex and CM Equity AG over in Germany, and a few others, they're all making the tokens. So you get the buy button and the tokens at the exact same time. I think you can start to see that there's a connection there. You get a lot of developments on the tokens then in June when we are running. You get our cost to borrow spiking to 1,000% when FTX goes down, really twice. So there's a lot of connections. I've spelled that out in other videos and tweets and Reddits and whatever. There's a whole timeline I've published too. And oh, by the way, you recall that when Cohodes came, he was pushing very hard and had purchased some influencers to push us very hard to do what? Tokenize AMC, right? So that's kind of been their out the whole time, is my point of view, and that's my thesis. But now I think we have kind of perhaps we're finally going to go the other way at some point here. So you have the tokens that basically Sam's thinking he can create these sort of phantom, zero assets that aren't anything real. But when Adam released Ape, now remember, Ape was preferred equity. These are real assets. Preferred equity has a real value. Kind of go back and look at the par value of that when it was created. And you can look up some research too on, because preferred equity can act kind of almost like a quasi bond. Not exactly. It gets real technical, but it has some real asset value. Um, and so that's where I was kind of using this language, making spectral beings become real. So you've got this blockchain, ape shows up, and remember Brett Harrison, and you guys have seen the video going viral and all that stuff that apparently Elon doesn't want you to hit the like button on. Um, and that's the stuff I had talked about like 2 years before Brett even made that video. And so interesting to me to kind of watch him be in my feed all day, every day, because I was trying to warn about this in 2021. But anyway, so you've got these phantom assets they create, and effectively Ape shows up. Now, remember when Adam said checkmate? What if he was saying checkmate to Sam? Just putting that out there. And so it's kind of like this game of operation, because if they're building these sort of fraudulent blockchains with these wrapped assets that really aren't real, and then Ape shows up and it's real, and suddenly, whoops, something shows up on the radar. Think about, like, have you ever heard of, like, go to the hospital and someone, they need to, like, find out what's going on in someone's body, so you kind of, like, pass these radioactive isotopes through your blood and they can kind of track it. I had, I think, in some videos and some tweets, I kind of talked about that like isotopes leave a trace. So that was kind of what I was talking about there. If there's something real that shows up, suddenly the blockchain starts telling on you, and there's some things going on that can be more seen. So FTX, Binance, Bittrex, I said there'll be more. We've seen some things with Coinbase. Um, I'm forgetting at the moment, but there's a few others. If you kind of just look at some of who the SEC has been going after. And by the way, another one there, interesting to watch who has tried to stop Gary from going after some of these guys, right? That is also worth noting. In particular, Congress, there's a couple of funds. We can talk about Dougie Large over at Virtu. There's a group called Two Sigma. Boy, there's just a bunch. So you can just tell who's really concerned and does not want anyone to discover what was happening with all these tokens. But so Ape converts, and well, so that starts a clock. And actually, if you want to look at the timeline of all these Bitcoin ETFs, now we're a little bit back to Bitcoin. It was when Ape converted. So remember, first, let me go back before I even say that. When Ape was proposed to be converted and we voted on it and all that, what did we get? We got the lawsuit. That was a run out the clock exercise. They were really trying to buy time. And so what happened then is when the conversion finally went through, when we had a judge that decided to be sort of, I'll put it out there, pro-justice and honorable, that is actually when BlackRock and others went into just fast-forward mode on creating the Bitcoin ETFs. So you can say I'm being really speculative, but I've got some reasons why I believe that's related. And in particular, if you kind of just research wrapped crypto and swaps and derivatives and how that can relate to tokens and smart contracts, cross-asset trading, this all comes into play, and these are all things I've dropped breadcrumbs on a few times over the years. So just interesting to note that it's when Ape is getting converted that BlackRock goes, all right, we're going to hurry up. They went into a hurry-up offense with the Bitcoin ETFs, and everybody else followed along. And so then, also, this is definitely conspiratorial. I'll just own that one. But that some of the war events perhaps are also about big money trying to stay in power. I don't know. We could get into that and debate that over a beer kind of a thing. So I'll just kind of move on from that one. But so as we're moving along, wrapped assets are coming home at some point in time. Remember that all bills must settle. Don't forget algorithms, and don't sleep on that too. Algos run on time matches on. You might remember that tweet from Adam at one point, time matches on. People a couple times have tried to correct me. Hey, it's time marches on. Yes, I know that. We're back to now there's no coincidences. It's time matches on, and that has to do with telling you what's going on with the algos. So, and by the way, on all that, I know this is kind of like flying over people's heads probably right now, and some of it, I'll be honest with you, I'm still trying to really understand. I've got furious notes here on my side and all kinds of DD and research why I think some of these things. So I will try to make it more clear over time. But you can see even in that tweet, and you'll continue to get this from me, both here on the YouTube channel and on my tweets. If all that's cryptic and weird, just honestly don't worry about it. We're going to talk about that today, because even if let's just say you go retail, you're bonkers with this thesis, I'm not in line with you. I can still sit here clearly and tell you, because you guys know, if you followed me a minute, my expertise is really in forecasting and financial analysis and being able to tell what's coming before it happens. And I can tell you, AMC is going to be very, very profitable in the future. So we're also going to talk about that before this video is over. So if that's all cryptic and weird, and maybe you don't agree with my thesis that I believe the tokens are getting cleaned up, which is, by the way, why you've seen me use the hashtag #TheGreatUnwinding, something I've been saying a lot whenever you see me talk about that. That's ultimately what I'm talking about, is tokens getting cleaned up and basically a big, big squeeze on AMC, all related to Bitcoin now as well. But again, if that's all weird, whatever, we're going to be profitable, and boy, that's a way to kill the short thesis as well. So all of that is why on New Year's Day I had tweeted out, hey, 2024 is the year of AMC and Bitcoin. So now you know a little bit on just a really practical view from the Bitcoin side. That's all that supply and demand view I'm talking about. And then you get a little bit of, I don't know what to call it. I don't want to call it, I don't know what word I want to use, but you get a little bit more cryptic discussion on AMC tokens, why I believe that relates back to Bitcoin, why I believe this is effectively, there's once I tweeted like an arc to, it's kind of, it's the ship to sail us home. Let's say that. Okay, shifting gears completely. Now let's talk about just real easy to grab like meat, hard stuff. I'm just pointing to a couple tweets of mine, and this is not at all to self-pump. It's just to say, if you want to go deeper, here's where you go. So there's a Reddit I wrote a couple of years ago. Many of you have seen that by now, and you can see I retweeted it back in October. Why I think perhaps there's a global bubble kind of setting up. You guys know all the things going on with China. I would look through commercial real estate in the U.S. and a whole lot of other things. So, the unsustainability of debt loads, inflation, is there really a soft landing? You weren't warned about the crash in 08, and so I'm suggesting perhaps you're not being warned about it now when you're given all this soft landing language. Check that tweet on the right. That's got a whole laundry list of the reasons I think a lot of this stuff too, or check that Reddit to kind of see, a couple of years ago, why I spelled what I thought the end game would be and how this was all going to play out. And I still feel that. So that was my point of view in 2021. It's still my point of view now. It's taken longer than I wanted it to take in terms of the AMC side of things, but I still have the same thesis, which is why I'm still here. Meanwhile, who else is still here? The short and distorters are still here on the daily. Boy, I see them all over Twitter. I see the articles. So let's address a little bit here. So on the right are a couple slides from a video I did, I want to say at the end of October, beginning of November, somewhere around the earnings call from Q3. And I had walked you guys through a very long-term forecast, so you can go look at that. I shared what 2024 would look like. I shared what Q4 of 23 would look like, and I went all the way through 25 and 26 and why I'm so bullish on this company. If you are new to this channel, I can confidently tell you, in terms of forecasting results for AMC, I mean, I've been beating Wall Street every single quarter. So I don't feel like I need to put on false humility there. It's okay to say I have forecasted very, very accurately to the point of beating Wall Street. So I have some confidence in my ability to do that. It doesn't mean I'll always be right. I own that every time. But the point is, when you forecast something and then it happens, you don't suddenly freak out, right? You go, well, we said this was going to happen. And the point is, back in that October, November, so to the right, if you kind of look at the yellow stuff, I'm sure it's real small on your screen, but the point is, I was talking about the strike blip. It was knowable, 3-4 months ago, I was talking about how the strike had, I showed you even some of the movies, specific titles that were supposed to be in, say, Q4 of 23, or they were supposed to be in 2024, and they had moved out to 2025. So these titles would have brought in revenue, and that revenue would have been obviously movie ticket sales, merchandising sales, and concession sales. Well, if you move all that out, it's not real easy to make up for that. Now, Adam's done a great job. He's been adding in popcorn and distribution and candy, and so he's offsetting the strike. But I showed you how big the strike blip impact was, and that was going to impact us for a little while. And so that's what you're seeing. And so what I'm seeing, though, is your shorts trying to take advantage of perhaps the uninformed and saying, wow, look at how bad Q1 is. This is terrible. Some people are even trying to suggest bankruptcy again, which is ridiculous, because what a short memory to forget that recently Adam had brought us to like $1 billion of cash. Now I'm not suggesting we're still sitting on that. We'll see the most recent results here soon. But the point is, we knew about the blip for months, and I walked you through it in the forecast. All that is happening is what I literally told you would happen. There is no surprise. There is no disappointment. It's just matching expectations. That's fine. Meanwhile, we know that better days are coming. And this is why I don't freak out too. If I'm able to accurately predict some of the, let's say, not as fun results, and I've been able to, I was the one who told you more than a year before Q2 and Q3 that we were having those profits coming. So if I'm able to accurately also predict when good times are coming, then when a result is not so happy, but it was predicted, I'm not freaking out because I'm also predicting what's coming after, which is better days are coming. Okay, and I had showed you that. And we have a leader who also saw this coming, I'm sure long before I did, because he's got, the tools, the resources, and the people who are looking at this stuff. And he himself, I'm sure, is obsessing it to make sure that we win. And so I'm very confident, and I see the results of why he diluted, frankly, why he raised that cash, why he reduced some of our debt load, cleaned up the balance sheet a little bit, which also improved our cash flows. We have less interest payments going out the door. He set us up to weather this strike blip. Okay, so we're going to be in it for a few quarters. It's going to, get a little better. I'm sure it's small, but what you can see on the right here is we used to have this crazy steep upward to the right trajectory. There's Q2 and Q3, those profitable quarters. And what I was telling you is kind of bump that out in your mind. We're not going to keep on this trajectory anymore because of the strike blip. But notice it's not some big red arrow. It's still up and to the right. It's just we're waiting a while. And I believe Q4 of 2024 starts to get us back to profitability. Not just profitability, but even better than where we were. And then in 2025, far, far better than where we were. And then in 2026, levels of profitability, I think a lot of people would think I'm crazy that I'm saying, but I feel very confident in my forecast and why I'm saying that. So I'll go through that again in some other video, some other time. But the point is, the real question you have to ask yourself is, let's say I told you there's going to be 3 rough quarters, and some of them better than last year. Like Q1 won't be great. We knew that. But say Q2 and Q3, while they're not amazing, but they start to be, especially compared to say 2022 and 2021, geez, they start to be all right. They're not like completely miserable or something. So if I was to tell you on a full year basis that 2024 will still be better than 2023, you'd say, oh, okay. And in the meantime, he built up $1 billion cash to get through that. Yeah, all right, I'm fine. I can ride this out. No big deal. And the other thing, as he's been paying down this debt, especially once revenues come back and especially once rates are dropped by the Fed, I'm talking about, that debt is going to be refinanced. And I've said that for a very long time too. You can even go back a couple of years to me talking about that. I've never had concerns about that. So what Shorty wants to do is get you focused on, Q1 bad. Well, guess what? We knew that. Hollywood moved movies out. We're a movie company. And yes, we're growing distribution and candy and popcorn, but we're not, fully implemented on all that yet. We've got more growing to do, and, to be able to lose, half your movies and not have a problem. So that's real, and we knew it. So Shorty can go flip sand on that one. Second, the shorts want you to focus on 2026 debt and how much there is, and can AMC really earn enough profits to pay that off by then? Well, the thing is, that is a false argument. It's a straw man argument, in my opinion, that gets you focused on an argument of whether or not we can pay that off, as opposed to, I'm not even concerned that we need to, because if we refinance and say the maturity now is 2 or 3 or 4 years out, what if that debt moves to 2030? Now what, Shorty? Especially as we're going to be wildly profitable, easily start to pay that off. And at a time when banks really need our business. No bank is going to turn AMC away, in my opinion, especially as it's healthy and shows it has fixed its business model, which I have shown in the fundamentals time and time again. Lower expenses, higher revenue per movie. That's pretty good for a movie company, not to mention adding popcorn, candy, and distribution. So things are really great, in my opinion. I have a very high degree of confidence. You do you, but I'm not concerned. And so I just want to make sure that I'm arming people with the ability to kind of ignore some really ridiculous arguments. And also, by the way, to spot the people who are not actually with you. I mean, there's a lot of people who used to claim to be apes who are pushing some of these arguments. So they've kind of outed themselves. All right, so coming soon, some other things I'll talk about. I'll do an earnings preview for next week. I'll just kind of share with you my view on Q4. Now, I had done the forecast, so you can go back and find out, before the quarter started, what I thought we would do. And so I'll kind of go back and revisit that. I will kind of share how is Q1 tracking to give you a little more just kind of hard evidence about how we're doing. And I'll talk through the rest of 24. We had some more movies come in, a few move around, that kind of stuff. So it's just good to refresh it and see how are we looking. And now I've got more ideas on the distribution, which, by the way, I had considered distribution in 2024. I knew that we would have more, so I put in a plug for that. I had already kind of forecasted for that. And I'll continue to try to pull back the curtain a little bit on this thesis about the tokens and what I keep calling the great unwinding. And just a little, I'm going to keep this one cryptic. And so I'm just smiling on my end. So apologies for those who don't like it cryptic, but I'm going to keep it cryptic and it'll still make sense. Corrupted wealth never was a time traveler, but it is corrosive. And if you want something less cryptic, I believe that we will win. Let's go.